Before we continue on to the hands and the feet, we'll have to have the IKs in place for both the arms and the legs. So I'm just going to go and start with the arm here. And in the rigging tab here, you'll find the IK tool right here. And if you double click that, you'll get the tool options over here on the side here. The one thing we want to check here is to make sure that the current solver is set to rotate plane solver. If we have it set to the single chain solver, we won't get the right bending movement that we're looking for in the knees and in the elbows. So make sure you have it set to rotate plane solver before we start making these IKs. So we can close that tool settings and zoom in here. We're going to start on the shoulder. I'm going to click once there, and then I'm going to go right down to the wrist and click on there. And now we've created our first IK for that arm. As soon as you create an IK, it actually selects it for you. So you see how this joint chain turns purple? That indicates that this is the chain that is being controlled by the IK or being affected by that IK. So if you just press W and activate the translate key, you can now click and drag this IK around and you can see how it's sort of working to control those joints. If it happened to be deselected somehow, you can always come over into the outliner and select it through there. You'll see at the bottom in our case, we have IK handle 1 down here, and that's what we've just created. So by selecting that, you can do the same. You can move this guy around and get an idea of how this IK is going to be controlling our arm and our legs when we have them all in place. Now for the rest of the limbs, we can do the exact same thing. So I'm just going to press the G key to reactivate the IK tool, and then click on the shoulder over here on the other side, and then I'm going to click on the wrist, and I'll create my IK for that side of the body. Next we can do the leg IKs, but first I want to get rid of the foot roll joints that we made, so those aren't in the way when we're placing our IKs. First I'm going to select the root of our left foot roll system here, which will be that heel joint that we made. And to remove this connection so it's no longer connected to the hip like we had, all we have to do is hold Shift and press P, and that will unparent that from the hip. Now if you look in the outliner, you'll see that our inverse heel joint system is its own separate cluster. So I'm going to middle mouse over that. I'm going to scooch it right up so it's just underneath our main joint structure here, just for organization. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other foot, on the right foot here. I'm going to select the heel there. I'm going to press Shift and P and unparent it from the rest of the skeleton. And then I'm going to also middle mouse on that and scooch it up to the top. Now that we have those two systems isolated, I'm going to go into the outliner and select them both by holding Control and selecting them. And then I'm going to hold Control and H to hide those joint structures. And now they're no longer part of the equation in here, and I'm not going to accidentally attach an IK to the inverse foot joints because that would just cause trouble. So now I'm just going to hop right back up here and select the IK tool again. And then I'll click on the left hip, and then I'll go right down and click on the left ankle joint to create that IK. And then I'm going to hit G to reactivate that tool and do the same on the right side. So I'm going to click on the hip, and then I'll click on the ankle, and we've created our last rotate plane IK for this character. So now that we've done those, we want to go and name them so we know what we're looking at if we're in the outliner. So this one here, I'm going to call left arm IK, and then the one below it is the right arm IK. Below that we have the left leg IK, and then the last one is the right leg IK. Now that those IKs are in place, we can actually add our controllers for the elbows and the knees. Because if you grab any one of these IKs and move it around, you'll notice we don't actually have any control over where that elbow is pointing. And that's pretty important for animating because we can't always have it just sticking out wherever it wants to go. We create these controllers like any other controllers. So I'm going to go over to the Curves and Surfaces tab and make a curved circle. Now I'm going to scale it up a little bit so we can see it. And I want to snap these controllers to the joints themselves. So the knee ones are going to snap to the knee, and the elbow ones are going to snap to the elbow. And that's so when we constrain these, we don't offset the joints too much, because we'll see that our IKs will actually move a little bit when we constrain these. So we want that movement to be as minimal as possible. So setting this here, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to go into the channel box and make sure we're at 90 degrees exactly. And close it. And then I'm just going to pull this back a little bit because this is kind of where we're going to be working with this control. It'll be behind the character. And the knee ones will set in front. So I'm going to actually just start with this one. I'm going to make this and duplicate it for all the other joints. So we can kind of make it sort of fancy looking. And I'm just going to make an arrow, I think, kind of pointing to where it's actually controlling. Because I know that's what I see. I see arrows being used here. And so this looks pretty good. We know that this controller is pointing. It's sort of aiming at the area it's going to be affecting. So that's helpful for the animator if it's someone other than yourself. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to duplicate this with Shift D, and I'm just going to scooch it over to the other side, and then I'll go into the front view to actually line it up with the joint itself. So I'll look over here, and I'm going to hide the wireframe so we can see easier. And I'll hold down the V key so we have the point snap, and drag it over until we snap into the middle of that joint. So everything is in place, and now I'm just going to duplicate this again with Shift D, and I'm going to bring this to the knees. And then I'm also going to flip this so it's now pointing at the knee. So I'm going to go into the channel box, make sure that's at 180 so we know we flipped it right around. And then I'm going to drag this out. So I kind of want it about there, just outside our global controller here. And then I want to line it up exactly with the knee joint. So we're going to go to the front view again and do that same thing. So I'm going to hold V down and drag it from the side, and then I'm going to drag it from the top here. That way it snaps onto the knee on those two axes. And the last one, I'm going to Shift D and scoot that over, just like we did with the arm. I'm going to go to the front view, hold down V and drag till it snaps into that knee, and we're looking pretty good. All we have to do now is freeze their transforms and constrain them to the IKs. And we can do that next.